So I'm Jon Hull. I work at Nationwide. I previously was head of recruitment for Carillion, so I apologise, it was my fault. But I've been in recruitment for about 25 years nearly and have implemented ATS's HR systems, been on the receiving end of systems implementations in RPO, and this is really about the learnings from that, and we tend to focus on the tech, not the people. And it was probably about 8 years ago that this really struck a chord. I was at a conference in Paris, as it was an HR tech conference, and a woman got up and told a story about a tech implementation. Simon's laughing there, I told him this earlier. And she came on stage, not a normal thing to do on the speaker circuit, and described, all I can describe as a car crash. So the bravery or the stupidity was amazing. She told soup to nuts how everything, what went wrong, could go wrong, and did go wrong, where they didn't engage the stakeholders properly, chose the wrong vendor, the vendor walked away with £2 million of their money with no consequence, the company went backwards because they had no confidence in any kind of change program or to improve their processes, and she described this over 45 minutes, and it kind of made me want to cry at the same time as kind of go, that's really quite interesting, thanks for doing that, because I can learn something from this. To back that up, this is Panorama Consulting, management consultancy. Gartner have done the similar research. This slide just worked better. But what this slide says is that something like 2/3 to 3/4 of any ERP or tech implementation either overrun on cost, overrun on time, or both. And I guess more importantly, if you're not worried about time or money, is they only deliver half the benefits that they originally thought you would, okay? And this is the kind of problem. So the tech vendors, you know, and I don't want to bash them, can sell the dream, but does it get lost in translation somewhere? So this kind of got me thinking, right? And then after seeing this presentation, seeing this research, it's great. Then 2 years later, I walk into a company that will remain nameless, who had just implemented an ATS. So I naively, as the new head of resourcing, said, I just need some reports, right? All of the recruiters, to 100% said, we don't really use the system. We use our own spreadsheets. So people nodding, right? Now, who knew, right? So we've created an implementation to create efficiency. We've spent hundreds of thousands of pounds to create that system, and we've doubled the workload of recruiters. And I've got no benefit. I don't know what's going on in my organisation. Wow. So the first thing I did was then, okay, let's get some objectives. Let's deliver this. I need to do this because the HR director's asking me for reports that I've got no idea what's going on in my recruiting operation. Selfish kind of thought. But when we talked to the project manager, who wasn't an HR person, when I talked to the vendor, they thought that implementation was successful. So where was the kind of governance or thought about what, you know, where we go to look for that answer? That's what I was doing, right? Then I did join Carillion, about 2 years later. Similar but not the same. I could talk, then I learned, I thought I've learned stuff now. I bet the tech isn't working properly, or I bet the recruiters aren't using it. So I say, before I even ask for any reports or any kind of data, I say to them, what's the tech like? And they go, oh, it's shocking. Yeah, everyone nods, right? Do you love your systems? No, right? So I said to them, what's wrong with the system? Well, it doesn't do this, it doesn't do that, it doesn't do this. 5 or 6 things, major things that the ATS, you know, and I should do, or one would think would do. So I said to them, I bet you it does. I bet it does do those things. So no. I'll invite the vendor in and we can ask them. So we said to the vendor, okay, does it do X, Y, Z? 5 out of the 6 things they said, yes it does, but you haven't turned it on. Yes it does, but you haven't requested it. Yes it does, but it wasn't in the configuration. No one told us you needed that stuff when we implemented it. So it's not just the vendors. So then you start to think, what is it about the tech? Because tech on its own does not change the world. People change the world. And we're implementing tech to try and solve problems that we're in charge of, not the tech. So it's a kind of busy slide, but this was about culture. So in the 1950s, an animal behaviorist did an experiment where he put 5 monkeys in a cage, gave them a ladder and a stack of bananas at the top of the ladder. Every time a monkey, they're intelligent, they use the tool, they climb the ladder to grab a banana, a shot of cold water gets sprayed at the monkey. Then another monkey climbs the thing, a shot of cold water. Before the 3rd or 4th monkey started to do that, the other 2 monkeys would beat them up to stop them doing it, at which point the scientists replaced a monkey at a time. So over some time, there were 5 different monkeys than the original in there, at which point none of the monkeys even bothered to try to climb the ladder. What that says, it's about organizational culture, right? That experiment may or may not be true. You can look it up on the internet. There's a bit of debate, but it's the way things are done around here. And what that brings me to think about is when we do tech implementations, do we really think about the organizational levers we need to pull, the stakeholder engagement, and the way the organizations operate? This isn't just about hierarchy. It's where do you go to get things done to unblock your change or communication or whatever it is. So I think when we're talking about tech implementations of any sort or any change program, you need to really go back to basics and think about what it is you want. So it sounds basic, but we need to kind of think very carefully about what that tech stack looks like. Because the tech companies are great at selling you loads of stuff, but you might not need it. So it might be like moving into a house, brand new house, with a double garage, but you live in the city centre and you don't own a car. Why would you need it, right? And your house might be full of tech that you don't need because you're never there, because you've got another house in the south of France and you're never there. So think about, firstly, what outcomes do you want? What's the homework problem? What are you trying to solve? You don't need a bunch of tech that will solve problems that you're not even interested in, number one. Number two, think about the vendor, okay? Think not just about the product, but the way they or their organization can fit your culture and values, okay? Because if you're going to implement HR tech or recruitment tech, hopefully, you're not going to replace it in 12 months' time. It's not something that is easily done. It's like a marriage. You're probably going to be that, I'm talking about my own, probably going to last 7 to 10 years, right? At least. And in that, you need to think about lots of other stuff. Can they deliver, a longer term, more mature benefit, okay? Can they challenge you in the tough times, and will you accept the challenge? You're not going to just drive them down on price and hope that they capitulate. Are they willing to hold a mirror up to the way you manage your process and show you a better way, and you're kind of mature enough to explore that? Because otherwise, these tech implementations will end in disaster, right? Or tears, because procurement have taken the lead and they're just going to worry about price for the next 7 years, and you'll never get any development out of the system to future-proof you. And then finally, think about the stakeholders. And by that, I mean there's their internal stakeholders that need to sponsor it and understand what you're trying to do, number one, and can they give you the sponsorship budget or whatever is required. But finally, think about your users, okay? If I could take you back to that implementation where the recruiters weren't even using the system except for the candidates to apply, no one had even bothered to communicate with them or understand what they knew about the current process. And they're the people that will, number one, know the process inside out and understand what the current flaws are and what can be improved. But secondly, they will spot really quickly, what your agenda is. So if it's to lose jobs or change jobs, you need to be clear about that's what one of the outcomes may be, and be grown up enough to have those conversations, because they will spot it as soon as it becomes apparent that something's changed, and then you have terrorists in the organization. Effectively, they can and will derail that implementation more so than any external source or internal stakeholder that doesn't like the cost or whatever, or the politics of it. So really, I mean, in terms of kind of really what we need to think about. So what problem are you really trying to solve? Don't boil the ocean. Vendors, invest in the vendor and invest in the change. So the big thing about what no one ever thinks about in these operations is the change management. Vendors, the salespeople, are really willing to invest in a relationship over 12, probably 18 months in that sales cycle. And this is the criticism of a vendor, would be they invest in that and you get to know them, they get to know you. They walk away as soon as you've signed the dotted line, and they bring in an implementation team that needs to get to know you and all the stuff you've spent 12 months telling the sales guy about. So vendors, I would say, think about that. You know, what do you know about corporate behavior and change, and invest in that. From a client side, over-invest in the change and the training. Okay, you only get one bite of the cherry. Often the training or the change is taken out as part of the negotiation because no one thinks it's necessary, but that will stand you in good stead with your users, who will then become advocates. We talk about advocacy just now, but they then become advocates of that system to embed the change and involve all stakeholders at all points of the process, even when it's not great, and be clear about the kind of successes as you go along the project, even if it is just about, I can get some reporting now that I never used to get, tick, or I can get some clean data. It's robust. People always go on about that. And absolutely be clear about what will not be fixed, okay? What is out of scope of this project, and over-communicate with everybody. And finally, the embedding of the change or the culture or the system does not stop at 18 weeks when the vendor walks away and that project has closed, in inverted commas. It's about leadership, okay? That leadership to change the culture will probably take 18 months to 3 years, depending on the size of the scope you have. And you as a leader, we as leaders need to help those teams through that to keep them on the track. Otherwise, they will fall back into old habits and the system will become the whipping horse for the organization or recruiter or the individual or whoever it is that's affected. So finally, it's about Boris, right? It's about the leadership, first of all, right? Not the leadership he's thinking of, I guess, and certainly not now. And don't go chasing unicorns when you're implementing tech. Thank you.